Hello and welcome to the Observation Deck. I'm your host, Annie Peterson-Colette-Carr. And with me today, we have the Krause-Schiewer family. Welcome. We are...
Glad to be with you. Hi.
Let's see, where is my overlay that I have to remove? Okay, there we are. We're all together. Welcome, Felix on the left, and Leonard, and Naniq, and Silke. Welcome. I'm so excited for you to be here today. My goodness, when I got introduced to you by my former Sea Scout skipper, Sharon, and she shared with me a little bit about your story of how you've been cruising together, I was like, I have to meet them. I have to interview you. I think you have an amazing story. And I would love to know, Felix, you have a background with your family in, your father was a captain, right? Will you tell us a little bit about what it's like growing up in a family where you have a nautical experience?
Well, for me, of course, it was always pretty natural because my father just was the way he was. That means I was completely used to having a father that wasn't home most of the time, and a mother that was staying most of the time with me. I was lucky that my father didn't stay 10 months out of the year at sea like many others. My father always managed to be at least 3 months at home and then travel with us. But that's not the luck of many others that we got to know. So we live in Spain, or we lived in Spain. That's where I grew up. For my parents, it didn't make a difference. Wherever they lived, it was all right because my father was a sailor. And as a sailor, you can live wherever you want because most of the time you are either at sea or you are at home, and home can be wherever.
What kind of boats was your father operating?
He started with oil ships coming out of the Persian Gulf. Well, in reality, he started with a sailing boat. It was a Pamir in Germany, but not as a captain, just as a 16-year-old helping out. And the Pamir, it was the largest sailboat, three-master in Germany with 105 meters, I think. And unfortunately, it went down and almost the entire crew got lost. And he got lucky because he stepped off the ship on the last port before the last voyage that the ship took. After that, he basically stayed in that profession and then eventually went on chemical and oil tankers from the Persian Gulf around the world. And later on, because that was too dangerous for my mother, especially we had already some conflicts at those days between Israel and the Middle East. So he preferred to go on other ships, like container ships. And that is something that suited him well. And he went many times to South America and Africa with those ships. And very few times I was able to go with him in the summertime. But that was only on short voyages within the Mediterranean Sea and to Africa, never to South America. And later on, when I left home and went to study in Germany, from there on, my mother sometimes was able to travel with him until my father got sick and eventually passed due to cancer.
And at what point did you get into sailboats? Because your father clearly was into all the big ships, and you had those big shipping experiences. Where was that point? At what age did you move into sailboats?
That was very gradual because we lived close to the sea in Spain, and still my mother lives there even today. We had never the opportunity of buying a larger boat, something like a yacht or large sailboat. It is not easy in Spain to get such a boat, nor is the coast really nice to do some nice sailing. So it was only small dinghies that we always used on our travels to Greece and Italy and whatever. I always loved it. So I basically liked much more even diving, snorkeling, surfing, and even going with these small dinghies, sailing dinghies that are only a few feet long, maybe 9 feet, 10 feet, up to 12 feet, very short. It was much later when I started earning some money as an engineer, as a civil engineer, and we worked in Sweden, that finally I had the possibility of earning enough to invest in the boat. And even that sailboat was cheap compared to nowadays prices. And it had its difficulties. And the nice thing about the sailboat is that I could have it right at work where I was working. We were building a bridge from Sweden to Denmark, and it's a very nice sailing area there. And therefore we could have the boat right there in a little port next to the bridge, and I could combine it. Even if I wanted to go to work, I could use that boat. So we spent lots of time on the boat. Silke, my wife, later joined me for another year in Sweden, and we liked that experience. And that's when we got into real sailing, multi-day sailing. That is 1999. But of course, I was always dreaming already as a kid, having my own boat. And my big plan was always to go to one of these junkyards where they basically dismantle large container ships and use one of their lifeboats and convert it into something manageable for me and to travel with this lifeboat around Spain, but it never happened.
That would be very interesting. Okay, Vilka, what is your history with sailing? How old were you when you first got on board a boat?
Yeah, so I took a sailing class when I was a teenager. So our family went together with a few other families with teenage kids to Austria, and there as teenagers took like a 2-week sailing class, which was a lot of fun, especially with a group of other kids. And meanwhile, the parents had their spare time and they could do whatever they wanted without the kids along. And so I really enjoyed that. But I mean, that was just for a vacation. And then, as Felix said, longer term sailing started in Sweden. And Sweden was really so beautiful. They have all these rocky little islands, the Schiewen, and there were so many nooks and crannies and places to explore, little islands where nobody was living. And so that was just gorgeous, yeah.
So I am really curious, when you brought your babies on board, what were some of the challenges with having a newborn on a sailboat while you were cruising?
So I would say it was relatively easy. So otherwise we would do, let's say, for example, canoe trips or hiking trips. And with 2 little kids, it would have been very difficult to go on a hiking trip where we would have to pack our backpack with our luggage and the kids' luggage. So usually the kids had as much stuff as we had, so with all their toys and whatever. And so going on a sailboat was very convenient for us because the kids could have whatever it was, their Legos or books or anything along. And we could go travel around to beautiful places, yeah. So I wouldn't really say that it was difficult with the kids on a boat. Or...
No, it was surprisingly easy even.
I've seen
they really
videos. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
They really got accustomed. They very fast they got accustomed to the life on a ship, and it was surprising to us that they saw that as something very normal, almost too normal, because we sometimes were thinking, oh, in what special circumstances are we doing this? And they didn't see it that way. For them, that was just life.
Exactly. I remember watching a video of a family that had a newborn on board, and they created some very brilliant solutions for creating like a space for the baby to sleep. That was, they used a net to enclose a little day pen in one of the bunks. And then you could see the kid was able to crawl, roll over, sit up in this space that was theirs. And when you see it from that perspective, and you have the evidence before your eyes of how you can have a newborn on board that grows up into a toddler, you know, the light goes on and it's easy to say, oh yeah, I could see how that could be done. And I would imagine like there were times when you realized you had to teach swim lessons very, very early, correct?
Yes, of course. And there are lots of small and large challenges on a boat with kids. And it's not what most people think, for example, that maybe you don't have a bathroom or something like that. That's not the real challenge. The real challenge, of course, is keeping them safe and basically avoiding that they go overboard or that they get lost in any other way. So
so we had rules that they couldn't go on the deck of the boat when we were sailing, even if we had a little net around it, so that they would have to stay in the cockpit and, of course, wear their life vest. But I mean, it was also an incentive for the kids, as you said, to learn swimming faster. Leonard, do you want to talk about your learning swimming story? Or?
I mean, yeah. So I think we were in Bahamas, right?
No, in Puerto Rico.
In Puerto Rico. And so it was around Christmas, and basically we came into this nice kind of bay, and it was very nice. And we ate dinner, and then my mom and dad decided that I had to kind of learn swimming. I already taken a few lessons with them before. And
but there was a big incentive. The incentive was they had always to wear a life preserver, a life vest. But when we were anchored, of course they had to wear it as well. And that was a bummer for them, because then they were much more mobile and they were running around on deck. But we said the moment you can swim, you don't have to wear a life vest any longer on board. We don't care what the Coast Guard says in that regard, but we needed to somehow give them a little bit more of liberty and gives them this incentive of learning swimming fast.
Yeah. And so basically,
what a beautiful place to learn to swim in the Bahamas, right?
Or Puerto Rico, but yeah.
Or Puerto Rico, yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Well, let's say you took your swimming lessons in the Bahamas, and then you took the swimming test in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, and then so what happened is
so basically I never wanted to wear a swim vest, kind of, and basically we were anchored in this small bay, and so then they told me, if you jump into the water at night, if you jump into the water and swim around the boat once, then call out to us loud enough so that we can hear you, then you are allowed to basically not wear a life vest all when you're on the boat anchored.
That was when he just had turned five. So he was, and almost, well, between 4 and 5 years old, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, life vests, of course, are not always very nice. So yeah, basically, I jumped into the water. It was like kind of pitch dark, and I was of course scared of sharks. And then I swam around the boat once and called out to my mom and dad, and they heard me. And that was basically the test, that I was able to basically survive if I was to fall down into the water.
Yeah, we saw that a little different than he saw it. That's how he saw it, but we saw it completely different. We explained that to him for one day in the future, I mean, someday in the future, when you are fit to swim, you jump in the middle of the night when it's pitch dark into the water and swim around the boat, and then you knock on the side of the boat and shout, and then we have there an emergency step, and you hold on to this emergency step until we come and get you. We did not plan for that he was going overboard immediately, and he did that. So we were pretty scared at that moment, and I jumped immediately behind him. But he did completely fine, but he was so eager of not wearing this damn life jacket that he couldn't wait.
I hear you. I'm with you on that one. Naniq, what was your experience with swimming?
I think it was a pretty bad one. I was never really good at it. I think I learned it pretty late in my life, and even then I could swim, but I really wasn't good at it whatsoever.
And how do you feel about it today? Are you more comfortable wearing a life vest when you're sailing in rough weather?
I mean, yeah, I'm fine with it. It's like kind of uncomfortable, but I mean, it's fine.
So I mean, Leonard is a more ambitious one in terms of sports and so on. So for him, he was eager go-getter to quickly learn swimming, whereas Naniq is more easygoing. Let's see what happens, and yeah.
Yeah, and Naniq never was crawling around so much around on the deck of the boat, so we were not so scared about him. And with Naniq, he has a little. Well, we rate our family a little bit according to the seaworthiness, according to bad weather. And Silke is number 2, and Leonard here is number 1. He never gets sick, and unfortunately, I'm only number 3, and Naniq even beats me there a little bit. And that means when we get into hard weather, it's basically I have to stay all the time on deck and basically look at the sea to stay okay. While Leonard and Silke can just go on with a normal life, and Naniq is quite often miserable. But we found out that there's a trick to him being miserable, and that is really some kind of TV or cell phone or whatever it is. Of course, we don't have cell phones on the boat. But what is it again?
So,
tablet, exactly.
Yeah, in the old days, kids, and so when we would go on a long sailing voyage, then they were allowed, in order to pass the time more easily, to watch a movie, one of those old VHS cassettes. And so then somehow they were just absorbed in their mind in a different place, and so they didn't really care about what weather it was and what was going on outside. They were just in their little world, escaping. And
so when we got this Shoili, it had many nice features, but one of the features that I didn't appreciate too much was an old TV and right in the front in the V berth. And I was about to take it completely out. We didn't want to have any electronics on board, at least not that kind of electronics. And but I didn't take it out. And when we did the crossing to the Bahamas over the Gulf Stream, we got into bad weather and had a real bad experience that day and the following too. And Naniq wasn't doing very fine, but the moment that we switched on the TV, and that especially in the V-berth where the whole boat moves most in reality and rocks most and slams the sea, he was so absorbed in what he was seeing in the pictures that he was completely fine with everything going around him and with the mayhem, basically, that we found out that it was very useful to have such a TV. One day, when we got into kind of a storm, the TV basically jumped out of its support and the loudspeakers broke. But from that day on, they kept watching TV, but without any loudspeakers. Worked for them.
Yeah, but I mean, so even with it's not that he's super sensitive to waves. So once we took another family on board to sail to the Bahamas, and so in that case it was a situation that the husband of the family wanted to convince his wife that sailing was a lot of fun, and that it's suitable for a family. Everybody can go together and so on. And then we were leaving the Miami area and going across the Gulf Stream to the Bahamas. So the wife and kid quickly fell sick and were lying in the cabin after we all had dinner together. And the husband said, "Oh, no problem. This is fun. And I'll help you guys sail across." And so he was getting more quiet after a while. And so in the end, all three of the other family,
we are rolling around on the
sickness,
floor.
yeah.
We are rolling around on the floor, and
Naniq
Naniq was only 2 years old at that time. That was when we had this old TV, and he was completely absorbed in the front, and as if nothing happened. And we got water came into the boat as well, and he got wet in the front there, but he didn't mind at all. So the moment we came to Bimini Island, this family immediately left ship, and we never saw them again. That was not the original plan, to tell you the truth. And,
No,
and we went on. And sorry,
it happens. It's not for everyone.
yeah, and it didn't help to convince his wife to like sailing at all. Yeah,
and I mean, so the problem, one issue that we see in general is when you make appointments with other people. Because let's see, with sailing, either you can make an appointment that you're going to meet somebody at a certain place and go somewhere, but not a certain time, or vice versa. But if you say we are leaving this and this day and going here from here to there, then you're really under stress, and you can get into problems with the weather. And we had watched the weather forecast and said, okay, we can wait until the weekend till you're off work, and then we go. But then the weather forecast was progressively getting worse, and so it was a nice seaworthy boat. I mean, you like the trellis too, so we didn't really question the ability of the boat to deal with the waves. But for the people on board, then it was no fun any longer.
all the mishaps that happened with our boats over the years happened because we are under some kind of time pressure, and that's something that's really unfortunate, because of course there are sometimes relatives coming from overseas and they have this one trip booked forever already, and it's expensive, and we have to be at a certain point at a certain time,
Right.
somewhere. But almost every time we have to push ourselves very hard to get there, because there's always something going on, and those are situations that can get very stressful for everybody.
So I want to get to know the boys a little more. How old were you when you started to take the helm and start working the main sheets or the jib sheets and handle anchors and stuff like that?
I think it was around Bahamas and Puerto Rico time. So not really working much, but just like maybe helping around with like a little bit. So maybe 5, but we didn't really help that much. And where we kind of, I think, actually were a little bit help on deck was maybe 10, 12, where we sail basically in Alaska, kind of south of Alaska and Prince William Sound. And we do that for the entire summer. So yeah, we learned there a lot.
Cool. And do you remember learning how to do man overboard drills?
I think so,
In
yes.
Spain, when you took your own sailing class. Naniq, do you want to talk a little bit about the
So
class
they
that you took in Spain?
they both took sailing classes in Spain, because it's always better to learn from other people than from your own parents.
I hear you on that. Go ahead, Naniq.
Yeah. So we took a class in Spain, and there were, I think, 6 other kids?
Yeah.
And then, and then we took a small boat. It was very small, and then it was almost a lifeboat, like one of the bigger ones. And then we went out every
day, no?
Every day.
Sometimes a day, yeah.
And it was really more about how to sail. And then we sometimes also flipped over the boat just to practice how it would be. And yeah, that was really fun.
Yeah, flipping over a boat is really valuable. We used to do that with the Sea Scouts on San Francisco Bay. We'd go out on a whale boat, which is just a wooden boat that I want to say is like 33 feet long, and you can row it. It's got big oars, and the whole practice was that you would lose your fear of tipping over, and you would learn how to right the boat, bail it out, get it sailing again. And these are pretty big boats. I mean, it takes the whole crew.
Yeah, that must have been difficult. Yeah, it was such a big boat. Yeah, wow.
Exactly. It's a lot of fun. And it's dangerous conditions, right? Of course, they would pick the best weather to do this in, calm seas and stuff. But San Francisco Bay is very unpredictable, and the tides are pretty complex because of all of the different shorelines and islands that, as you know from your travels, especially living in Alaska, you've got things going in different directions. It's not all just in and out. It's this is an early ebb tide, and this is an early flood tide, and then we got slack water over here, and then we've got other stuff going on there, and the winds and the fog and everything that add to the conditions of sailing in San Francisco make for some very interesting challenges for the teenage sailors that are playing on the bay. So do you guys like to sail race or anything like that, or have you kept it just to cruising?
We haven't done any sail racing so far, so we don't know. It sounds fun. I would like to do it, but we mostly just go sailing with our family for a month or two.
There are no opportunities in Alaska.
Yeah,
we are about one of the very, very few sailboats here. If we see in a whole summer of 3 months, one sailboat, that's much. One other sailboat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, most of the islands are uninhabited, and so I mean, there are so few people going out fishing with motorboats from Valdez. But for the people that are going cruising with the sailboats, there are so many places to be that you don't run into them very often.
Here in Alaska, we have a completely different boat culture than you would have in California. Here, people own mainly engine boats, power boats, and most of them are made out of aluminum because of the rough conditions here. Okay. And because of the tides. So if the boat, basically, the tides are falling and you get stuck with your boat, an aluminum boat usually doesn't take as much damage. And most people basically are not too knowledgeable about boating, but they're very knowledgeable about fishing, and they combine the two things. We call them the weekend warriors. So they come down and put their very fast and really nice boats into the water and just race off into the far corners of Prince William Sound or of the coast, usually within a range of 30 miles. And try to get as much salmon and halibut as they can, and then they return the same day. So overnight sailing or overnight boating is very uncommon here.
What is the water temperature on average where you live, and whereabouts are you in Alaska?
So that is the water temperature is completely can go completely crazy. It depends if the water is close to a glacier, and we have many of them. I mean, we are talking about hundreds of glaciers. So the water around the glacier is not only cold, it is murky, it looks like milk, and is around 38 degrees, even in the summer, 39.
Yeah, even lower. I mean, we had water, yes. Let's say, below the freezing point sometimes. Because it's salt water, yes, it doesn't freeze as a regular temperature. So maybe it was 30 Fahrenheit or so, and we were doubting our thermometer, does it really work? And then, we figured out, no, that must be correct. Yeah.
So we thought in the middle of the summer we were going to freeze in, basically. But then, in just a few miles away, the temperature can reach 72 degrees Fahrenheit on the same day, the water temperature. So where our cabin is, that is luckily a bay without any glaciers. And that means on a good and warm summer, yes, it reaches 72, and we spend almost every day swimming in the water.
I would. And what about the tides, the
Yeah.
extremes that you experience up there on a daily basis? And then talk about like when it's even higher and lower on average. Is that full moon tides or those extremes? Leo, what's your experience with that?
So we have to be really careful, with anchoring. Yes, something may look like a nice anchoring spot with a lot of water under the keel, but then you have to figure where you are in the tides, and it may be dropping by 10 feet or something. Yes, so then you really have to be careful with the radius of your anchor chain and rope. Whether you could hit into any rocks when it falls. Yeah.
So you're asking about maximum and minimums. Again, that depends so much within a few miles in which bay you are. It can be easily 20 feet between max and min. But in reality, for example, in our bay, between max and min, we are talking 16 feet. And in other bays, it might be only 10 feet.
So
And we've
who's
had
in
it before that,
charge
like
of
some.
calculating that?
We are we were very lucky. At the beginning, we had, of course, a GPS that was telling us how large the tides would be and when they were coming. But unfortunately, that feature got lost in our GPS because it got too old, to tell you the truth. And now we go by the charts, basically by the Coast Guard charts. And although in Alaska, they are not as accurate as in California, and they cannot be because, as I said before, these towns on the coast are very far apart, and in between these towns, the tides can vary very much. But nevertheless, they are a good guideline, and therefore we try always to anticipate the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah, so I mean, in Alaska, I would say that the charts are pretty good. So occasionally there is a rock or something, but for the most part, they are reliable. In contrast, for example, to Baja California. So they are essentially, it was not really a sea chart. It looked like a sea chart that we had, but you could really go by what the predicted depth were. And even the coastline looked different. And so there, for example, it happened that, we were anchored in a nice little bay, and then at the dinner table, somehow things started sliding off the table, and we noticed that the bay had fallen dry, and the whole boat was sitting at an anchor, and that's why things were rolling off the table. Yeah, so that can happen. If we don't have reliable information.
But that never happened here in Alaska.
I mean, we've had it once that one of our neighbors, we have a cabin out at the sea, and we have a cabin right next to us. So, and we've had before that they didn't push the boat up enough, and that they basically were on the beach for maybe an hour or two.
No, they were on the beach for several hours, and they were, luckily we have only one neighbor in a huge bay of 2.5 miles long. It's just a coincidence that there's another cabin. It's native land around us. It's Naniq Indians. They are basically the natives living around us and or owning land around us. They don't really live there. And the village, Naniq, is 10.5 miles away from us. And there are, in the winter, around 12 people living there. And in the summer, there are around 300 people living there. And they only speak their own language. And it's really, really nice getting in contact with them. The only downside is that you don't get much in contact with them because they like to stay on themselves, and that's fine. So because it's their land, obviously. So we are very respectful and try not to trespass and to try to respect all the rules, and it makes this whole area very, very special.
I want to ask you a question about this experience that you're having living in a very remote location. And do you have the ability to drive there, or do you have to get in your boat and go 10 miles away to get groceries? And how much do you fish? Do you hunt? What's the whole picture out there? I'd love to know more.
So there's a big misconception of most of our friends when they come out that they can continue with their normal life, with their social media and with whatever they have. Well, we don't have anything. That means we don't have electricity. We have a very spotty cell phone signal, very spotty, space not any. Of course, there is, maybe I have said it already, no port, no road, no people, except this one neighbor, but he is from Florida, so he doesn't come up much, maybe once a year for 2 weeks. And otherwise, there are no boats, basically, and the only thing that we are happy that we have it, because it's something like a fallback option for an emergency, is a lodge, a wilderness lodge. It is 2.7 miles away across the bay. And if something goes horribly wrong, we can always jump in our motorboat. We have 2 boats, and rush over and get help. Never had until now, but it's nice that we have that option. But that's the only option, because we are 4 hours by boat away from these.
So it depends on what boat. So it's 35 miles. And so with a motorboat, it can be at an optimum as fast as 3 hours. But if we go with our McGregor sailboats, then it would be more like 7 hours. So it's quite a ways away. And so we don't go to town for shopping. Essentially, we take everything that we need for the 2-3 months with us. And then there's something from nature every day, pretty much. Yeah.
So Silke started writing a book about all edible plants that are there in the neighborhood. And we try to live off that knowledge. So she has over 100 plants by now that we find there, and all the different uses, medicinal uses, nutritional uses, and so on. And that's what we eat, basically, for 3 months.
Yeah, and of course, lots of fish and shrimps and octopus and mussels, clams, things like that.
Yeah, we have a salmon stream like 300 feet away from our cabin. So it is possible even to like not even get the salmon with your fishing, but you can literally scoop the salmon out with your hands. So yeah, that's how we get our food sometimes.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. I have a brother that loves to fish. I'm sure he would love to go up to Alaska sometime and witness this kind of experience. So how many days of the week do you actually go sailing?
Silke, do you take it?
Well, I mean, usually we don't sail every day, especially not since we bought a little cabin there in Prince William Sound. So many days we just go out, hiking to our favorite swimming lake or blueberry picking or something like that. And then the sailing is mostly when we do longer trips that we go away for overnight stays to explore different parts of Prince William Sound. So there's still many places that we haven't explored yet. And so this is for the long distances that we, take the McGregor, put up the sails, and so on. And
before we bought the cabin, we did sailing like for 3 months. So, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, the weather in Prince William Sound can be very spotty, in Alaska as a whole, I mean. And there are summers that are beautiful and almost subtropical, and then there are other summers that are just crappy. And in 2015, we had one of these terribly crappy summers where everything got moldy in the boat. And we just got on each other's nerves. And then we started to look around for maybe something else. And we didn't even have in mind getting a cabin, but we wanted to get off the boat and explore. And even although it was raining, do something fun. And we had heard about this one place where there was a cabin for sale. But so we went to that bay and couldn't find it. And we're giving up basically on it. But we had we have always these agreements with the kids. And they were watching a movie because it was, so the agreement is when it's raining like that, they are free to watch a movie. And they were watching a movie and we were dinging around. That means using the dinghy and boating around, looking for this boat. It was like an Easter egg hunt, not this boat, for the cabin, sorry, and couldn't find it. So we went back to the sailboat and said to the kids, well, it's time to pack up to get the anchor, and then we are on our way again. And they said, no, the movie isn't over, and we had this agreement. Please keep looking. And so we kept looking until the small outboarder, that is a 3 horsepower outboarder, failed. And we were adrift in the bay and didn't have another way to get back to the boat, and it was pouring. So we were floating to the coast, and I was looking for sticks and stones to repair the engine. And Silke looks up, and suddenly she sees this cabin in the middle of the rain, and started climbing up. And I followed eventually, and it was exactly that place. And still, we didn't think much about it. It was exciting to find. It's like geocaching. It was exciting to find it, but that was it. But then we made an offer later on, much later. And it was still available, and the sellers were eager to sell. So then that's how we got the cabin, basically. And that really changed our lifestyle in Alaska. So now we turned into fair weather sailors. We are not any longer foul weather sailors.
Okay, boys, I want to know, how do you guys do your schooling? What's that like?
I mean, we do it in the summer, so we don't really have school. I've had it before that I had to do like online classes there. And so, of course, we don't have any like Wi-Fi there. So we had to print out the entire textbook. And I basically sometimes do school to like get ahead in classes or whatever. So it's difficult because you can't ask any questions to the teacher. You just have to teach yourself sometimes. But yeah, you have a lot of time to do the schooling. So it's whenever you want to.
So online schooling does not work in Fish Bay or in Prince William Sound because you have to really take the boat and take it out for 1.5 to 2 miles to get any kind of signal, cell phone signal. And that is only a weak signal. So it is impossible to do online schooling.
Naniq, how would you say that sailing has helped you problem solve?
I mean, I find the nice thing about sailing is kind of like the calm, not necessarily the calmness, but like that you like kind of recognize that there's like, it's like a huge natural force. And I find it's incredibly interesting to be like incredibly mean and like brutal, but then it can also be incredibly calm and incredibly nice to look at. And I find it helped me a bit by just like giving me somewhere to like have like a calm moment or something that I can just be at peace of mind at sea.
He loves daydreaming.
I'm with you, buddy. I had to stop sail racing because I thought it was more interesting to be looking up at the clouds and figuring out what they look like. I love cruising more than I like racing. I find racing very stressful. I grew up racing on San Francisco Bay, and then I got into racing big boats. And then after doing some ocean cruising, I realized I love cruising. Like, it's hard to explain. I'm sure all of you understand. It's a passion of mine, and I hope to return to that and spend many decades cruising. But I want to also ask you, where are you off to next?
So I'm basically in my junior year now. Next year is going to be senior year. And after senior, I'm going to try to go to Europe to go to university there.
Excellent.
So yeah, that's my plan. I don't know if it's going to work out, but yeah.
Do you know what you want to study?
Something in terms of business, MBAs. Yeah.
And Naniq, what about you?
I have a similar plan as Leo. I'm also going to be going to Europe and then I want to study something in computer sciences, IT stuff.
I had a feeling when your dad shared that you did really well with the television screen, and it brought you into balance. My son is very much wired for programming and computers, and his name is Adrian. So he'll be 10 this year, but he has not yet been on a sailboat. He's been on a powerboat on San Francisco Bay, and he enjoyed it. But I would love to get up and cruise Alaska. I mean, you have some of the most beautiful scenery in the world. You have phenomenal anchorages. Let's talk about all that daylight you have. Does it ever get to you?
In the summer, yes, a lot of it.
I mean, it's kind of annoying when you want to like go to like have a nap or something, and it's like it is evening, but it's still loud outside, and like light is still pouring in, and then you can't really go to sleep. It's kind of annoying sometimes.
What are some of the other challenges that you find up there? I mean, does it ever get lonely?
I mean, here basically there's not a lot of people, but the people that are here in Alaska, basically in Fairbanks, we have 80,000 people in our city. It's the second largest in Alaska. But because there's so few people, the people are more like close to each other, and so I don't. Some people get like kind of depressed because it's so dark, but I've never had that before.
And when you meet people on your travels, have you stayed in touch with them?
I used to, not too much because we don't meet too many people on our travels. But yeah, I did once or twice keep in touch with people. Not anymore though, but yeah.
So usually we stay off the beaten path. For us, that's really important. But yes, we stay as adults, Silke and me. Yes, we stay in contact with people that we meet.
And Naniq, are you interested at all in the systems, the digital electronic systems on boats? Would you be interested in working in that area?
I don't really know. I mean, I don't know exactly too much about digital systems in boats, since the boats that we use normally don't have too much with technical stuff to do. It's normally just like a GPS or something is like the highest technique that we have, maybe a radio or something. But it's not that we don't have too many technical devices on our boat, so I wouldn't really know.
So what's next for you as a family?
Well, we know spring break is coming up in March, and so if the weather is decent, we are going to go out to Prince William Sound again, to our cabin. Obviously, yeah, with a boat, yes. And so there, it can really depend a lot from year to year. Some years it's very nice and sunny. It already kind of feels like May weather or so with the snow melting. And in other years, we had once that the harbor in Valdez was still frozen in, especially the small boat ramp. And so we somehow had anticipated, because Valdez is supposed to be a year-round ice-free harbor, that it would be no problem launching the boat there. And I mean, the seas were calm and so on. We had checked the weather forecast beforehand. But then getting there, we were so floored that it was all covered with a sheet of ice. And so I was ready to already drive home and give up, but Felix doesn't give up easily. So, yeah, he was asking around for solutions and getting in touch with the harbor master. And so then they actually broke a path through the ice with a heavy metal boat for us so that we could launch our boat.
Neat.
Yes.
Are you guys keeping track of all your stories in a journal somewhere?
No, in reality, we don't do that. No.
We only have a small cabin book, but that's mostly what happens around the cabin. So
Yeah, so for us, the big project is Silke's book that she writes about the vegetation, and that is what keeps Silke very busy, because she does all the picture footing and of course all the research and libraries and so on about it. It is anyway a little bit for your audience maybe surprising how small many things are here. Valdez, the town that we are talking about, the big harbor town. Well, the big harbor town, the population is 2,000. That's all. And it's the biggest town for a long stretch of coast. And when we are talking about Prince William Sound, that is by itself a huge, humongous area. So the nice thing that Prince William Sound is pretty protected, not very protected, but pretty protected. But if you leave that area and go into the Arctic Pacific, you easily encounter waves of 20 feet or more. And then there is almost nobody who is going to rescue you if something goes wrong. So Prince William Sound, the diameter from tip to tip basically is more or less 80 miles maybe. And but there are many hundreds of bays, large bays, some of them 30 miles long, where you can get lost, and that is beautiful, and you're always all by yourself. So of course Alaska has more coastline than the rest of the United States together, but you have to be well prepared to sail those coastlines, because you should never think that you are going to get rescued if something goes wrong.
I agree. So do you all have EPIRBs on your life vests, and do you ever have to wear a dry suit?
So we have an EPIRB for the boat, and we do only daytime sailing, not like before in the Caribbean or in Baja California and Sweden, where we sail through the nights. We don't do this in this cold waters here. If something happens, if somebody goes overboard, it would be immediately a huge disaster here. So yeah, we have satellite connection, but we don't have much technology. We are all not about that. We try to rely more on our own skills.
Amazing. I love it. Self-sufficient. Well, I must say this has been an absolute pleasure getting to know all of you in just a little bit of time. I'm sure you have 1,000 more stories you could share. And Vilka, if you have a website with any information, even if you get it to me later on, I'll put it into the channel notes so that anyone who's interested in knowing about what's edible in Alaska, that would be fascinating to them. Great.
Well, I'm still working on my plant book. It's not finished yet. And I don't know whether it ever will be, because I'm always trying to add new species to it and new uses.
But that's the idea, that it will never be finished. So at the moment, it's over 100 plants.
I can imagine. But it's a beautiful project by the sound of it. And I thank you in advance for sharing your knowledge with the world. That's going to be amazing. Okay, well, thank you so much. And I wish you all smooth sailing this spring break that you're going to go on, and have a wonderful time. And I'm super grateful that you joined us here today on the observation deck to share your memories and your experience with other young sailors who are interested in what goes on in other parts of the world and on different sized boats. And I look forward to hearing from you guys again. And I'll be in touch.
Yeah, so you should come to Alaska one day, Annie.
Oh, I plan on it. I could do the remote thing.
We are much more social than we make ourselves. So although we are traveling off the beaten path quite often, we enjoy meeting people very much. So.
Of course. I do too. I plan on sailing around the world as much as I can. So yes, I will definitely be in touch. Nice. Thank you again so much for joining us today. Okay, take care.
Alles okay?